All the conferences are saying that if you go to the pros, you cannot come back to college athletics. That makes sense, right? Will the Pac-12 do it? I don't know. We'll find out.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in, Locked On College Crossover, Locked On Pac-12, and Locked On Zags, and welcome on into the show. Today, we are going to talk about, again, some things that we probably should never be talking about, and that's crazy. Welcome to a podcast that we shouldn't be discussing. I can't believe we're going to have this conversation, Andy. The fact that we have to discuss, is it okay to be a college athlete, then decide to go pro, and then, you know what, say, actually, let me go on back. Let me not collect $200. Let me get back to college and go and participate in college athletics once again. That's what we're hearing, especially in the NFL. We've obviously seen it in the NBA to the college basketball last season, but it sounds like we're finally getting some type of uniformity from the power conferences. The Pac-12 is yet to determine what they're going to do. We'll get that in just a second. But the SEC as the one that's really kind of led this. And they had their first statement here, and this is a statement saying they're not going to allow college athletics or pros come back to college. That seems like a very reasonable thing, right? So it says, following meetings with the presidents, chancellors, and athletic directors of the Southeastern Conference, the SEC will enforce the following policy. An SEC institution is not permitted to have an athlete on its roster who has either previously declared for the NFL, NBA, or WNBA draft and did not appropriately withdraw, sign a contract with an NFL or with the NFL or another professional league, NBA or G League, I think that's important, or WNBA or affiliate, or been listed on an NFL or other professional football league, NBA, G League, or WNBA affiliate roster. Commissioners authorized to enforce penalties, all that good stuff. I think eventually you're going to put baseball on this too if they decide to change the rulings with the MLB draft with high school players. But regardless, this is something that needs to happen. This is obviously, if you go pro, you're done with college. Like, that's the thing, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack here with the SEC's statement here. But I think overall, the sentiment that if you voluntarily leave college athletics, and I think a very key part of their statement is basically if you're leaving before you get rid of your eligibility, if you have declared and are declaring while foregoing your future eligibility. That to me is a huge part of this conversation. And it's a part of the conversation, especially with regards to the class of 2022, who they did not leave and forego any future eligibility because when they chose to leave, they did not have eligibility. They did not choose to leave. They were out of eligibility. They moved on with their professional career, and now they have the opportunity to come back. And I think it's important that trying to say these players can't come back is trickier. It's trickier legally. I think all of this is going to be tricky legally, and I think that's a huge part of this conversation is the SEC can make their statements and say these are the rules they're planning to enforce, but what happens if the lawsuits that get filed and have TROs and injunctions granted say that the NCAA is incapable of punishing them? Does the SEC count as part of the NCAA? Some of the lawyers are going to argue that. Like, it's going to get, I mean, it's hard to believe that it's going to get messier, but Christian, it's going to get messier. Like, I'm going to tell you that right now without a doubt. But yes, to me, one of the simplest out of all of this kind of chaos and confusion, one of the simplest statements is, if you leave college athletics, you should not be able to return. And the RJ Lewis is obviously the big storyline here, the player who was at St. John's, Big East Player of the Year. He goes to play in the NBA, declares for the draft, knowing that he's probably not going to get drafted. There's quotes of him and his father saying that in 2025, he sure enough does not get drafted, signs a contract. Now, he didn't play because he was injured. I don't think that matters because he signed a contract, and now he's coming back and he's going to play at LSU. Except now the SEC is saying if you do that, you're going to get hammered with a huge amount of punishment. So I don't think RJ Lewis should be able to play college basketball. I don't think Charles Bediako should have been able to play college basketball last year. He only played 3 games before the NCAA got that decision reversed. Obviously, this is also happening in football, and I think that's a big part of it too, is if you left and you left as a junior, you had another year left, chose to leave, and now are trying to come back. That is a situation that I don't think should be allowed. But we're a long ways away from figuring out what exactly this is going to look like and how enforceable the SEC and the Big Ten and likely other conferences, including potentially the Pac-12, how enforceable the rules they may put into place are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that the SEC actually stood tall here and didn't decide to allow these players to come back, because a lot of these players were trying to go to the SEC.
Right.
Like, I think the biggest one that really drove it home was tight end Daquan Wright, who played in a preseason game for the Cleveland Browns just a week ago, and then entered the portal and was planning on going to LSU. A lot of this is LSU. Go figure. Will Wade, you believe it? Could you believe they're actually willing to do this stuff?
Right.
Regardless, I think that's where they drew the line in the SEC. I'm glad. Like, I can't always say that the SEC does the right thing, that's for sure. But this time around, I certainly can. I think they are on the right side of history with this one. John Rothstein reported that the Pac-12 is discussing whether or not it will enforce similar eligibility rules like the SEC. The Big Ten is also on board with the eligibility rules as well as with the SEC. So the two power conferences, the big P2, if you will, of the two major power conferences are on board with not having this. So I think others will step in, but I don't know if everybody's going to. I don't know if the Big 12 is going to. There's got to be probably some sort of competitive advantage while this is in limbo to maybe say, hey, look, we're going to allow this to happen. And let's look at it from the Big 12 lens for a minute. Do you think it'd be wise of them to do that? They already kind of have a smear on their face after the Sorsby deal. If you do this with more professional athletes, do you think or is it just the Big 12 just doesn't care? Like, let's get just more exposure for the Big 12 conference. Maybe it helps us get more in the college football playoffs. Like, where is your mind there?
Yeah, the Big 12 and the ACC, I think, are interesting spots here, because for the most part, like, if to use football terms, G6 conferences, mid-major conferences for basketball, like, most of them probably aren't going to pull a lot of former pros anyway. And so for them, it's like, how much does putting this rule into effect really matter, or not putting this rule into effect? How much does it change? Whereas for the Big 12 or the ACC, like, if you're a player, in football or basketball who wouldn't be eligible to play for the SEC or the Big 10 based on these rules, but in theory have a legal precedent that allows you to play, you might go to a Big 12 school. And again, for basketball, like, Big 12 and ACC is not really far behind SEC and Big 10. A lot of the programs are not behind them at all. And so, like, yeah, you would want to do that. Whereas, like, it's not going to matter as much in the NEC or the SWAC or the Sun Belt or anything like that. Like, they're probably still not going to go there anyway. But it is an interesting dynamic. I would think that the shame would maybe, like, if the other conferences are doing it and you're the one who's not, and is very blatant that you're not doing it to try to get a competitive advantage, I would think that would maybe hinder some programs or some coaches or some
scheduling issues, maybe.
But here's the deal, that, like, we're in a shameless society. Like, the thumbnail we used on our Locked On College Basketball show yesterday was shameless for RJ Lewis. Like, if they don't care, if they're blatantly willing to go for cash grabs and to admit I failed and didn't make it as a pro and I want to come back to college, even though I know I shouldn't be allowed to, like, if there's no shame, then it doesn't really matter. Then people will do whatever they can to get a competitive advantage.
Underrated show, by the way. That shameless underrated show.
Very
no
good
doubt
show.
about that. But you're right. It's definitely a shameless thing. Where do you draw the line? That's the biggest question that I have. I have an idea to where you can draw the line. We kind of already gave it, but, like, I'm going to give you my legit blueprint. It's going to be more NFL focused, but I think it can go for anything else. Let's do that next, right here. It's a Locked On College crossover. But first, let's dive into our friends at Game Time. There are more live events than ever before. And, games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals, you name it. The hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees. Buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. That's why many fans are turning to Game Time. It's the app that is making buying tickets simple. Upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, exclusive saving opportunities, and helps you get the events without the unusual hassle. It has all the great things with Game Time. I say this all the time when I talk about this, because I've used Game Time and I certainly love it. It certainly does live up to the hype. The worst thing in the world, other than internet lag, Andy, is getting surprise fees anywhere. And especially when you're trying to enjoy yourself at a concert or something like that, It's the absolute worst, but you don't have to worry about that with Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with every type of event with Game Time. Download Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKDOWN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. All right, let's dive more in here. Locked On College Crossover. Thank you so much for making this your first or second listen of the day. If you're over on Locked On Zags, go check out Locked On Pac-12. We're covering the conference every single day, multiple episodes. And if you are a Pac-12 fan, you need to learn about Gonzaga. So get on over to Locked On Zags, hit that subscribe button, join the conversation, join the fun wherever you're listening on today's episode. Where do you draw the line? Here, I'm going to give you my proposal, and then let me know what you think. It's going to be more NFL-based just because this is where this conversation has really been. But I think this makes sense. If you still have eligibility left in this 5 for 5, I'm going to use the 5 for 5 framework because that's where we're at right now. If you have any eligibility left, but you decide to declare for the NFL draft and you are drafted, you're done. Whether you play a snap or not, you're done. An NFL team has chosen that they want you, you're drafted, you're done. That's my point. If you declare for the draft, but you're not drafted, maybe you're undrafted free agent, but you sign a contract, you're done. So I think that's easy. It's that simple. There it is. There's my framework. Now, my only thing is, what do you think about the drafted portion? Do you have to sign a contract, or if you're drafted, does that count? That's my only thing here. But I think it's that simple to just say you no longer can come back to college football. You are seen as one of the top 256 players in the NFL that are they're willing to put you on your squad and give you a chance. That means that you cannot come back.
Yeah, I again, I'm thinking about it from a basketball perspective as well. Like those rules, I think apply to both sports pretty evenly. I do think you hit on the biggest kind of question, and it was the question that was determined for Baylor center James Nagy last year, who had been drafted but did not sign. He did not sign any contract whatsoever. And at the time, he was allowed to play. He's still eligible. He transferred from Baylor, but he's going to play college basketball this season. That is a tricky one. Like I think that's a tricky one. That is, I think there is a little bit of nuance there, but I tend to agree. If you sign a contract, you're done. I think that's like, and for basketball, again, there's the Exhibit 10 contract versus two-way contracts versus obviously standard NBA contracts are all a little bit different. But I think generally, if you put pen to paper on a professional contract at a higher level, then I think that you should be done. And I know that the challenge that the NCAA is running into from a lawsuit perspective, again, for basketball specifically, is that players who played professionally in Europe are allowed to come to college basketball. Now, college basketball, the NCAA is trying to limit the amount of that's happening, but that was part of RJ Lewis's successful argument to get eligibility back for him. As he said, there are players like overseas who played professionally, who signed contracts, who made more money than I did, who played more professional games than I did, who are playing college basketball. Now, again, in Lewis's case, it was the fact that he left college basketball that should have made him ineligible, and it kind of still stunned that ruling happened the way that it did. But that is a tricky part of this conversation. And I wonder how that specifically will be handled. Like, because to me, I think you're right. The line is if you declare early and you get drafted or you sign a contract, you're not coming back to the sports. If you declare early, you don't get drafted, you don't sign any kind of contract, that's a little bit trickier. And again, right now for the class of 2022, like those players basically left under false pretenses. They thought they didn't have eligibility left. And so that's a different situation as well. But I think ultimately there has to be a line. You have to have a deadline for when you're going to have to declare for the draft or return to college sports. And that deadline has to be enforceable. And I think that is where I'm at as well. Like otherwise you create chaos and rosters are super malleable for the entire offseason instead of being able to set them ahead of time. For basketball right now, it's players wanting to come back to college while classes have already started. Like it's really messy and outside the spirit of what college athletics are supposed to be. And I do think that line at least very much needs to be drawn. Now there's some of the lines the NCAA or the SEC are pushing here that I think I might push back on a little bit, but for the most part, I think the idea of trying to prevent actual pros from returning to college athletics is a good thing.
Yeah. What would you like to push back on? That's an interesting subject there.
The biggest one for me, and I will fully and entirely admit that there is a bias here in the bias being that it impacts Gonzaga. Like if the Pac-12 were were to enforce specifically all of the rules that the SEC has laid out here, as the way that I understand it, is it says signed a contract in the G League. And that to me is a bit murkier. Like the G League, like the NBA is the highest professional basketball league in the world. The Euro League, I think, probably should be ineligible if you've played at the highest level of Europe basketball as well. But the G League is far more comparable to like the Pro League in Germany, Pro League in Spain, Pro League in France. And if you've only played in the G League, if you haven't been drafted, if you haven't signed a contract in the NBA, that to me feels more allowable. And this is Izan Almansa is a big man who's been committed to Gonzaga since May. He's not eligible currently. The NCAA hasn't ruled one way or another, at least not publicly, on his eligibility, but he did not get drafted. He did not sign an NBA contract. He has played professionally in Europe, but most of his professional experience came as a 18-year-old on the G League Ignite. And to me, that feels like it shouldn't be counted against him. Obviously, yes, there's a reason I feel that way, but I would feel that way about other, Cherry Darlan is playing at Santa Clara. He's a G League only guy. Like, I think that's fine. I don't think there's an issue with that. So that would be my main pushback there. But any other, everything else feels fine. NBA, WNBA, NFL, again, depending on if baseball changes their rules, MLB as well. But I think for the most part, G League should be acceptable if you didn't sign a two-way or a standard NBA contract.
Honestly, that's pretty fair because you can go play in the G League and then get drafted, right?
Right. Yes.
So that's pretty similar to college basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I can see that argument. That one, I don't know if my personal fandom agrees with it. Obviously, from Pac-12 standpoint, I want to see players, play and some premier players play in this conference. But like, I can understand that argument. So I'm with you there a little bit. I'm with you there a little bit. Okay, so you mentioned Gonzaga and obviously some immediate impacts. Is there anything else in this conference that could be an immediate impact if this stuff does come true, if the Pac-12 decides to put this statement up? I know, like, for example, Anthony Hinkerson, the Oregon State running back from last year, has been thinking about coming back. He has not decided where he's going to go. Jamarcus Shepard, the head coach of Oregon State, has said he's got about 48 hours before he can hit the portal, and they want him to come to Oregon State. But if that statement jumps up, then obviously he can't do that. Anything else on the basketball side or football side that you're tracking that can impact this conference right away?
Yeah, I think for the most part, most of these rules wouldn't impact anything any of the Pac-12 schools are trying to do, which is why I think these rules make a lot of sense, because it's not impacting huge swaths of players. It's just the players who are very blatantly trying to return to sports after they shouldn't be able to. I mean, I think that's a pretty fairly universally agreed upon thing. But for Gonzaga, they're in pursuit of former Florida point guard Zavion Lee. It's him and Donovan Dent were their top two targets at point guard. Dent obviously is committed to LSU since then. Lee, a lot of reports are out there that Lee signed an Exhibit 10 contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers. I want to make this very clear. He did not. There was a huge report of players who signed Exhibit 10 deals. And what actually happened was those players agreed to Exhibit 10 deals with their respective NBA teams. Almost nobody actually signed the paperwork. So Zavion Lee has not signed any kind of professional contract. And I want to make that very clear, because if Gonzaga does land Zavion Lee, his eligibility is still going to be a question mark depending on the California lawsuit and if it gets stayed. But from an NBA Exhibit 10 perspective, that is not a concern. Utah State just landed Dallin Hall, who's a fifth-year senior. He did not sign a professional contract, so he should be fine. I think a lot of the players that are coming back to college basketball, these fifth-year seniors, are not going to be impacted by these rulings. So I think that is an important acknowledgement of, like, if the Pac-12 does put into effect many or all of these rules that the SEC and the Big Ten are wanting to put together, it's not going to have a huge impact on these sports. For Gonzaga, it would impact Izan Almansa, which is what we talked about. That is why I'm curious if the G League part will be included or not. I know Gonzaga will push back hard on that. But again, if they're the only school pushing back on that, that's probably not going to necessarily help sway the votes too much. So we'll see there. But yeah, it is something that, this is why it makes a lot of sense, is because it's going to more primarily benefit, if they allow it, it's going to benefit the SEC. It's going to benefit the Big Ten more than it benefits other schools, which is why I think Pac-12 and ACC and, even like Mountain West, Sun Belt, other smaller conferences should be in favor of these conferences putting in these rules, because it's would more likely benefit them than it would benefit anybody else. And so I'm hopeful that, again, this will be enforceable and that the courts won't demand basically that the SEC not, their lawyers are trying to say, they'll be in contempt of court if they enforce these rules. That's going to be a really interesting legal battle because a conference not being able to enforce their own rules feels insane. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to go, but it's going to make for a wild couple of weeks, that's for sure.
Yeah, go figure. We need just exactly what we need. More court stuff. That's what we need. Right before
billable
college
hours
football
always wins.
Yeah, always for the billable hours. Billable hours for Heisman. I mean, man, they're going to make the Sweet 16 this year. Crazy stuff happening, no doubt for that. All right, let's have some fun. It's college football eve, folks. Let's do Zig or Zag next, right here. Locked On college crossover. All right, final few minutes of this episode here. Locked On College Crossover, Locked On Pac-12, Locked On Zags. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. We really appreciate you stopping by, and we really appreciate you loving this segment because we hear a lot of good comments. It's Zig or Zag.
It's time for Zig or Zag.
It's really cool that everybody likes this. Like, I've got some really good comments here. I've seen it in the Zags Discord as well. So with that. So, all right, got some serious and super serious things. It's college football eve. Yeah, week 0 is here. We got FCS games on Thursday. You can go and watch Maine versus Townsend at 6 o'clock Eastern time at good old Johnny Unitas Stadium. Like, you can do that if you are a sicko of college football, which I am, and I will have that up on one of my 3 TVs in the office. Yeah, that was a flex. Don't worry. But overall, I think one of the biggest games in week 0 for college football has certainly been the international games, the Dublin games. So Zig or Zag, a general thing, football, basketball, you name it. Are you in favor of college athletics going abroad?
Yeah, I'm in favor of it. Gonzaga has done it. They did it. Oh gosh, it was over 10 years ago. They went to, I think it was Japan, and they played Pitt, and the court was incredibly slippery. And I think they actually called the game at halftime. Like, it did not work out very well at all. But I like it. I like the idea of it. I think it's fun. I think, especially if you're doing it like in exhibition games or in tournaments, for football, I think it's fun as well. Why not get in front of a different audience, especially if it's a game that maybe isn't necessarily going to bring in the biggest crowd, in whatever home stadium it would typically be at. I think it's fun to bring that abroad and get a new audience, new fan base, for people watching on TV, get a new scenery for the game. Like, I think it's a cool thing. Why not? College sports are obviously much more regionally focused than professional sports. So I don't think that it needs to become like a super consistent thing, but every once in a while, especially to start a season, like, yeah, why not? I think it's fun.
Yeah, TCU, North Carolina will be playing in Dublin, Ireland to begin the season for the FBS. That will be Saturday at noon Eastern time. Exciting stuff. There's no doubt about that. I'm so happy that college football is back. We'll get back to that routines in just a minute. There's no doubt for sure. Actually, you know what? First, international game or aircraft carrier, Gonzaga fan? Which one would you rather do there?
Yeah, Gonzaga hasn't had the best of luck with either of those. Their aircraft carrier game against Michigan State didn't get canceled, but it was quite slippery. The floor, the floor is not great because just the sweat concentrates, and then the shooting, like, even though it wasn't a windy day, like, there's still outdoor effects that are different than being inside. But again, I think one thing that's important there is, like, the game may be messy and ugly, but it's not unequally messy or ugly. Like, Gonzaga won that game against Michigan State when they did it a few years ago. And It's not like you could say, oh, well, Gonzaga won despite, like, Michigan State was dealing with the same situation, the same, elements, as it were. I don't love those games because they're just sloppy and ugly, but I don't mind, again, if they were every single year or something like that, that would be different. But every once in a while, they played it on Veterans Day. It was a military appreciation game. Like, cool. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's worth it in that environment. And I think it's cool for the fans who go to those games. It's not a great experience watching, but again, I'm fine with any sport trying new things every once in a while. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, fine. It's not the end of the world. I think it's worth trying.
Yeah, I remember the sun being an issue, the shade.
Yes.
There was like dead spots in the court. Like, yeah, it was wild, but it was fun. It was fun. It's something you remember, and that's, like, exactly what they were looking for as well. All right, today, how about this? Not only is it College Football Eve, it's National Dog Day. How about that? How about that? So drop in the comments. What kind of dogs do you have? What's your favorite dog? I have a golden retriever. He's an old man. He's like 10 years old now. His name's Hendrix. I name all my dogs after musicians. That's a thing that I've had. My parents did that when I was growing up, and I just followed suit. So I've had Hendrix, obviously, for Jimi Hendrix. I've had Henley for Don Henley. I've had Jackson and Charlie for Jackson Brown, Charlie Daniels. Like, I've had that. So that's my jam there. What about you? Oh, I did have a baby Cocker Spaniel. We only had him for a little bit, and we had to give him away. But his name was Joe, for Joe Cocker. All right, go ahead. Continue. What about you?
So we have a dog right now, and actually very similar story to the story you're telling. My parents, we only had one dog growing up when I was younger, but my parents and my grandma have always named their dogs after basketball players. My grandma's dog is named Clyde after Clyde Drexler. My parents' dog, when I was younger, was named Kersey after Jerome Kersey. And so our dog, I was planning to name it after a Blazer like they did, but then was like, okay, well, now that I'm a Gonzaga person, I want to name my dog after a Zag. And when we got our dog, it was my wife and I, we were not quite married yet, but she was not a Gonzaga fan. And so I wanted to name the dog Pangos after Kevin Pangos, but she was like, I don't know who that is. I don't have any connection there. But the first games that she went to were in Las Vegas in the 2018 WCC tournament. And in that 3-game tournament, you can look up the box scores. I'm not lying to you. Killian Tilly went 14 of 15 from 3. The most nuclear 3-point shooting performance that I have ever seen in my life. And Jenna was like, is he the greatest basketball player ever? And I was like, right now, yes, he is. And so our dog is named Tilly after Killian Tilly. She is a pit lab mix. She's a big, anxious sweetheart of a dog. She's just turned 7 years old last month. Love her to death. She's a fantastic dog around our daughter. And yeah, Tilly after Killian Tilly. Love keeping that tradition alive.
Yeah, my next dog, my plan is to get, I want a couple more dogs because I have a farmhouse out here now. I want to get like a droopy-eyed dog and name him Mumford, because I feel like that would make so much sense. Yeah, for sure. All right, final one here on Zig or Zag. Obviously, it's college football weekend. What is your routine? What's your go-to? So my first college football weekend, I usually, every weekend, I usually make like a chili or a spread or something like that. Even though I work it, I like to do something that I can go and, go to the Instant Pot, grab it throughout. I'm not going to do that this week. I'm going to save that for the full week one, but I'm doing meatball subs. That's what I'm going for this time around. What's your go-tos on college football days?
Yeah, I know when I used to live with a couple of roommates back when we were all working at the University of Portland together, we would do the tradition that lots of people do, the kegs and eggs, where we would just wake up in the morning, have breakfast, either get a little pony keg, have some friends over and just watch all day long. That was a big part of it. Haven't had as much of a tradition recently. It sort of depends. My wife works so many weekends, so it depends if she's working. Obviously now with a toddler, it's maybe going to be chasing around a kid and trying to fight the whether we're going to watch a game or watch Miss Rachel on the big screen, kind of how that's going to work out. But yeah, it hasn't been a tradition as of late, but certainly I've had some fun traditions with that in the past.
Yeah, maybe you got to add a new tradition, like joining me every Saturday night once week one starts. We'll be doing Locked On Pac-12 After Dark, a live stream every Saturday night once the final game ends. And everybody you've seen over on my show over the last couple of weeks have an open invite, so you can see a whole bunch of open guests. So it's gonna be a really fun time. So make sure you can check that out. Look at that. You got to get the first tease for that. I haven't told anybody. So awesome. All right, let's get out of here. What a wild episode today, because that's exactly where we're at right now. The wild, wild west of college athletics. I just can't believe where we're standing, where we have to argue the fact that professional athletes have the opportunity to come back to college sports after dressing in a Cleveland Browns uniform and playing on TV. Like things like that. It's just insane. And thanks, LSU. It's all your fault. We're going to blame you for most of this. Let's get on out of here. Thank you so much, folks. Please like the video. Please subscribe. This has been a Locked On College crossover of Locked On Zags and Locked On Pac-12.